Welcome to Big Ideas Made Simple. I'm Jess Weber, and this show exists for my friends who are full of ideas and somehow still feeling a little bit stuck. Not because they don't know enough or could do enough, it's more because they're lacking a lens to understand or filter from. And so, just like every other episode, this is one big idea stripped down to what actually matters and handed to you in a way that you can take action before we're done. So, if you've been with me the last few episodes and you've done some of those items that I challenged you with, I would venture to say it's feeling big. It's feeling heavy because I talked a lot about identity and North Stars and big whats and big whys. And that is a lot cerebrally. But what I know to be true is that you can sit and think all day long, but the key on the other side of it is whether or not you took action on it. So it's not about thinking about moving or planning to move or, creating a strategic path for movement. It is the actual act of moving in a direction of the thing that you said that you were going towards. And so if your answer is yeah, I've taken action, then this episode should likely confirm what you already know and give you a framework to continue to protect that. But if you didn't have a resounding yes, so if your answer was something in between or an even no, I haven't done anything because Jess broke my brain, then hopefully this episode will offer you something that helps move you in that direction. And it stems from a space that I wish I had learned so many years ago, and I feel like nobody ever taught me. And that piece is that it's not a lack of clarity or your mindset. And it's definitely not a problem in terms of discipline or drive or work ethic. Those are the things that get named way too often in neurotypical productivity and self help culture. And the thing that I think gets missed more often than not is the room that you're standing in and trying to build from. That is where the problem stems. So here's what I know to be true. You can have the most audited identity, the clearest North Star, and the biggest, most specific why and what on the planet, but still fail at achievement, at executing, at moving. Not because the strategy is wrong, but because the environment you're trying to operate in is working against you every single day. And you have been using your willpower, your blood, sweat, tears, grit, grind, whatever word, hustle, even if you want, to compensate for it. And willpower is a terrible strategy, especially in the long term. So today's big idea is your problem probably isn't your strategy, it's your lack of including your environment in it. So I'll go back a little bit. I want to take you back to March, end of March, beginning of April 2020. You know, the week that the entire world shut down. Well, for me, that week was even bigger in the context of the fact that I found out I was pregnant. So, math people or people, I guess, who struggle with math, that means he wasn't technically a COVID baby. He came pre COVID. But you have to realize I had been working in an office building 40 plus hours a week. So that structure was my container. And they told me when to start, when to stop, when to breathe, when to eat, when to be productive, when to go to the bathroom. And it was doing a ton of work for me that I had no idea about. And yet overnight, it was completely gone. And I know lots of people have stories of how COVID pivoted their perception of work, how they had to, pivot became the new word, I think, of the year in the context of work from home setups and stories. But my story, I feel like, is a little bit different than most in this context because that pregnancy was my fifth one. I had had first 4 trimester losses before Thomas, which meant that the environment I had to design was not just about where my laptop lived or how many masks I had on hand or how I was going to stay productive, but it was about protecting two lives at the same time, my own and my son's. And so there was no grin and bear it. There was no grind through it. I mean, I could no longer run on adrenaline, caffeine, and chaos the way I had been. My body had a new schedule and a new reserve of energy, and I had to pay attention to it more than I ever had before. And so, what I had known about myself since the early days of school, but showed up heavily in this instance, was that my creativity, my sharpness for execution showed up right when I woke up early in the morning. And so I was very strategic about leveraging those tools in a morning time block and then giving myself the space to be exhausted and nauseated in the afternoon, like my body was going to do, whether or not I gave it permission. I mean, that first trimester nausea and exhaustion felt like I was repeatedly running into a brick wall every day by about noon. And so instead of trying to negotiate with my body, I built my days around my reality. So I got up early, I did the creative work, I clocked in for the team meeting at 8:27 every morning, and I structured everything around creating rituals like Benjamin Hardy talks about in his book Willpower Doesn't Work. Because routine is repetition, but ritual is intentional. And those rituals allowed me to be thoughtful and design opportunities for myself, not just do something on rinse and repeat. So I made myself accountable, like I said, to that morning team. And I knew that that structure was important, especially because I was an employee at the time. But I protected my energy reserves and my afternoons for things that didn't require the full cognitive load or capacity like the morning things did. And I really paid attention to the reality of what my body was doing. And so here's what it taught me. I survived the pregnancy. I also hit every goal that was I was responsible for in my employment. And everything that I learned from that experience, I took into the season of business ownership when I transitioned out of that employment opportunity several years later. So it taught me how to build my business without clocking 40 hours a week because I already knew how my environment needed to look. I knew how my brain and body operated, and I challenged myself to really consider my output, not my time clock. So I learned that first the hard way, but now the environment that I built out of necessity in 2020 became the container that has made everything possible for me from 2023 onward. And it wasn't because I was, David Goggins level disciplined, but it was because I leveraged my environment instead of fighting with it. So, like I said, I've said it time and time again, Benjamin Hardy, someday we're going to be best friends, but right now I'm rereading Willpower Doesn't Work for like the hundredth time. And in it, the core argument is that your environment shapes your behavior whether you design it or not. So habits, output, decisions, focus, distraction, everything is influenced by where you exist. So physical, structural, mental, emotional, those are always being shaped. I'm sorry, those are always shaping how you show up in the world. So the people who seem to have incredible discipline aren't actually running on willpower, David Goggins. They're designing their environment so that the right behavior is their default. And the wrong behavior requires more effort from them. So it's not discipline as much as it's architecture. And in school, trust me, because I taught for forever, we are not taught this. You're taught through, especially, parents who probably worked in W 2 roles and have an employee mindset that if you want something, You push, you grind, you pull your bootstraps up and you commit harder, or you wake up earlier, you white knuckle your way into the thing that you desire. And that does sustain people sometimes and can for a while until burnout becomes real. And that can be corporate burnout, it can be emotional fatigue, it can show up in so many different ways. But here is the specific thing that I see a lot with the audience of this podcast. And honestly, I saw it in myself for a long time. High capacity, multifaceted, polymathic thinkers, like the ones with so many ideas, your visionaries who may even feel a lot of distraction from those ideas because they all feel legitimate. Those people are exceptionally vulnerable to this idea because when everything feels important and you're super capable across multiple disciplines, your environment has to do the filtering work that your willpower can't. So you cannot think your way out of a poorly designed container. And you cannot outdiscipline an environment that is built for an old version of you. And so this is why this arc over the last few episodes has really been rolling around in my mind, and hopefully it all comes together here for you. Episodes 12 through 15 were about the internal work, recognizing who you are, what you're actually building for, and what you want to leave behind in the world. And all of that matters, but it only will work if the conditions around you are built to support them. So you heard me say way back in, I think it was episode 6, that containers probably don't fit you anymore and that you've been trying to shove yourself back into it, that you were trying to shove yourself back into a box that was built for a smaller version of the person you're becoming. And this is that next chapter of that conversation. So now I want to talk about building a container intentionally for the person you've become and you're growing into. So you're setting yourself up for design. You're setting yourself up for success. And environmental design is not about turning your office into a Pinterest board. It's not about, you know, creating something that looks so good on every single Instagram carousel that you create. But what it is about is asking yourself a very specific question. Is the space that I'm operating in helping me do the work that I said I was going to do, or does it compete against it? And so there's a couple of layers that I would love to talk through briefly just to help give you context. And all of them don't need to be perfect, but you need to recognize all of them and be able to audit which one's really working against you. So, first and foremost, your physical space. Like, think about, where are you actually doing your work? And does that space signal your brain that it's time for that type of work? So this is, again, not about having the perfect, beautiful home office. It's about having a, a consistent enough physical context that your brain stops having to decide whether or not you feel like working. So the decision gets made for you by where you're placing your body rather than you having to make a decision. And this is why, like, experts will say you shouldn't work in your bed or work on your couch, but you should have a dedicated workspace. That's what they're talking about. And when I was pregnant and trying to build this entire new environment from scratch for the work from home situation, one of the most important things I had to figure out was what kind of work could happen where in my house. And it was a small house, like 900 square feet. And my husband was working from home at the same time, too. So we had to figure out where we could show up in a creative space and have output, where administrative work could get done, where rest could get done. And so the physical space started doing some of that cognitive sorting for us. I would do my administrative work at the desk with my multiple monitors that I had collected over the years, and we called it the command center. But my creative work might happen laying in a hammock or on the couch. And so it became this opportunity to really be so cognizant of where my feet were planted and what I could accomplish in that space. And once I got a handle on the physicality of everything, then it made it easier to go to the next layer, which for me is your schedule architecture. So this is not my homage to time management because I'm very anti time management. It is not my love of time blocking in the generic productivity sense. It's what I would call more body led scheduling. So knowing what you're capable of when and then protecting those windows fiercely. So most people will schedule their days based on other people's calendars. Meetings go wherever someone else requests them to. Deep work gets whatever's left over, which is usually nothing or next to, which is why people feel like they never get anything done. But what I learned was, my body had a schedule long before I acknowledged it. I was the kid that woke up at 5 a.m. and wrote my research paper to turn it in at 8 a.m. because I had that brain that operated best in the morning. Little did I know I was actually doing environmental design at 16. But hey, instead of fighting to override it and then wondering why I was so frustrated with the output, I started to learn how to work with it. So, building a schedule around everything relieves so much of the physical and cognitive load. It doesn't make all of the work easier, but it removes some of the resistance. And so the question is not about clocking hours. I don't care how long you work. I care more about whether the hours you're working in are the right ones for the right type of work that you need to accomplish in the moment. And once you can get a handle on that, that leads you to that third layer that I was thinking about, which is input filters. So we've got physical, we've got your schedule, and now we've got input. And this is probably the space that most people skip, but it's also the space that costs us the most when we do that. So, what is coming into your environment on a regular basis, maybe daily, that is pulling you towards the work or away from it? Because every input is part of your environment. That's the notifications on your phone or your watch, the content you're consuming, the conversations you're having, the commitments you say yes to that keep showing up on your calendar and taking your attention. For, again, that fast paced thinker, this layer is especially crucial because I would bet that you are interested in a lot of things. And that's not a flaw, it's actually a really valuable quality, but an unfiltered input environment will turn curiosity into a distraction machine. So, the reason I spent so much time talking about a North Star is because it becomes that filtering mechanism for you. The beat framework that I shared is there to help you surface it. But those don't work if your environment is constantly introducing new inputs that bypass your filter, and you're just going to be stuck in an audit phase and never be able to execute on anything. So the question is not, what do I want to add to this environment? It's actually, what is my current environment costing me more than it's giving? And so that's really what I want to push, into your world and thought process today is all of the work that you are doing matters. Clarity is a real thing. North Star, I hope you found yours. Your big what, when you get there, I hope it's wildly meaningful. But you are not behind on your goals and your dreams because you lack discipline. You are not stuck because you are absent of motivation. I would challenge that you are just operating in an environment that was designed for a person who no longer exists. And no amount of buck up buttercup is going to compensate for that gap indefinitely. So here's the thing that I would love for you to do this week. Do me a favor and look at your current environment, all the layers, physical space, schedule architecture, input filters, and find something that is costing you more than it's giving you. So it's a distraction, it's a competing output, it's a commitment that's on your calendar that pulls your attention away. One meeting that could have been an email, a notification that doesn't need to actually vibrate, or light up your phone. Remove it, optimize it, do whatever you need to do to change that one thing. Because here's what I know after building and rebuilding my container multiple times: you don't need the perfect environment to start. You just need a better one than the one you're currently in right now. And the person that you are building towards deserves a room that's actually designed for them. Because you truly cannot build a new life in an old room. So I want you to take the time to design the container first. And that's it for this episode. If this landed with you, share it with the person who has all the clarity but somehow is still stuck and not moving. I hope that this conversation can help them too. And if you want a book to read, like I said, my literal favorite book that I still don't have a signed copy of, Mr. Hardy, is Willpower Doesn't Work. That right there, that concept, that idea is your starting point if you want to go deeper. So, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.